Hey, it's me, James, and in this video, I'm going to be providing you some more examples of the answer spread using playing cards. So stay tuned. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of my ongoing series where I'm sharing aspects of my personal study and practice of cartomancy using playing cards. In a more recent video, I demonstrated what is known as the answer spread. It's from one of my favorite books. If you are no stranger to me talking about playing cards, and you know that my favorite book on cartomancy is The Card Reader's Handbook by Regina Russell, and the answer spread is a reading that comes from the pages of that book. So what I will do is, if you're new here, if you're just finding me for the first time, I will make a link, or leave a link I should say, in the description box below of the first video where I showed you the answer spread, and as well as a book review I did on the Card Reader's Handbook. I should probably say it's a book walkthrough. It wasn't really a review because I'm very biased about the book. So how can you review something that you're really totally biased on, right? Anyway, so the answer spread video that I did was one of the more popular episodes in this ongoing series, and I noticed that a lot of people circled back and made the request of providing more examples of scenarios or situations in which I use the answer spread to answer those particular questions. So that's what this video is. It's a follow-up to that video. So we're just going to get right into it. The deck that I'm using is my favorite deck of playing cards to use. It is the Bicycle Vintage Classic Playing Card deck. So I will be leaving a link in the description box below where you can learn more about that deck. But again, it is one of my favorite decks. So now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and take a look at the first of 3 examples with the answer spread. And here we are with the cards on the table. And before I shuffle the cards, I'm going to go ahead and think of a scenario that would serve as a way to demonstrate how to work with the answer spread. So I'm just taking a moment to think. And what I'll do is, I think for this first one, I will do a work-related situation. So let's say we have a woman, and let's call her Beth. So Beth is at a job, and she's in a management position at her job. And right now in her department, she's experiencing a lot of challenges. So there's things like there's a high turnover rate. She's having a hard time retaining employees. People want to transfer out of her department into other departments within the company. And so Beth is just really feeling challenged with all the things having to do with employee retention. So she's considering whether or not, because it's impacting the morale on the existing and current employees, as well as taking a toll on her because she's having to put in a lot more time on the job due to less people being able to perform the jobs within the department. Okay, so she's having to kind of like fill in for them, but she's doing it regularly and more than she would like. And it's affecting her quality of life and work-life balance. So there's a lot going on in there, right? So basically, Beth is considering whether or not it's time for her to consider leaving this company and exploring other job opportunities, basically looking for other work. So that's the question. So Beth wants to know, is this the time to consider, strongly consider, leaving the company and pursuing another line of work? Okay, so having said that, I'm going to go ahead and take a moment to shuffle the cards, because if you're no stranger to my videos, you know that I like to shuffle the question into the cards. So that's what I'm doing now. So again, we have a situation with a woman named Beth, and due to the things that are going on in her department with the company that she works for, she's considering as an option leaving and pursuing other lines of work. I'm feeling that's good. I'm going to go ahead now and cut the deck. And so since this is a situation that does not directly involve me, I always cut away. Now I'm going to go ahead and fan the cards out. And if you remember from my previous video on the answer spread, you know it consists of 6 cards. So I'm looking for 6 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. Alright, so those are the 6 cards. I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up, and I'm going to put that to one side. And now, I'm going to pick the 6 cards up, count back, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Because I have 6 cards, and now I'm going to lay them out. If you remember from the previous video, the answer spread consists of 6 cards that get laid out. 3 going across the top, like so. And then 3 beneath that first row, like so. Okay, so these are our 6 cards. And now, remember that when you're working with the answer spread, 2 things. Number 1, that the answer spread is used to answer the one question being posed to the cards. It's not going to give you information on any other situation or experience other than the one you're asking about. So you have to be really clear and specific and intentional with the question, because the cards are going to be answering that one question. That's the first thing, and that's probably the most important thing, right? Like, I can't, as a reader, I can't stress enough the importance of asking a clear and specific question and reading to the question. It's something that I touch on with my Cartomancy coaching students all the time. It's something I'm continually reinforcing. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing, when it comes to the spread, even though we laid the cards out in rows, you're going to read them in columns. So now, here's a refresher. The first 2 cards, first column, is going to represent the situation. What more do we need to know about it, or what aspects of it are the cards going to show us or tell us about? That's the first thing. The middle column is always going to be the answer. So you want to look here first for the answer to the question, right? This is the situation, this is the answer. And then the third column is what we call contributing factors. This is more information about the situation. Maybe some aspects of it that are going to come into play as you're moving towards the answer, right? So that is the way the cards are laid out. So now let's take a look. Now remember, this question was about a woman named Beth and her situation with her department within a company that she works for, and she's considering the option of moving on from the company and looking for other work, right? So she's asking the cards, what does she need to know about that? Would that be something that she needs to strongly consider at this time? Okay, so now the cards representing the situation, starting with the top. Here we have the 2 of spades. Okay, so now this is perfect because spades in playing cartomancy for me represent problems, challenges, obstacles. This represents a block. So a block with what, right? The 2 is the number of relationships, right? It's also a number that talks about help, support, cooperation. However, when it's attached to a spade, it's all the opposite. So instead of cooperation, this would be conflict, right? So here we have perfect card for the situation, right? Here we have it showing that there's a conflict with regard to Beth's work environment, right? Also, 2 is the number of balance, right? So remember, in this scenario, when I talked it out, she was having issues around a work-life balance. So the 2 here would show an imbalance, right? If the spade is the opposite of what it would mean in its positive sense. Here we have an imbalance, right? And we could also go with the idea that spades for me represents the mind, right? So here we have a thing where she's exploring 2 options, or she's like got 2 things on her mind. I call this the double-minded card in that case. Like she's being double-minded, like should I stay, should I go, that kind of thing. And probably being torn between the 2 options. So there's a lot there with just that one card that fits everything I talked about with regard to Beth, right? So I would really see this as, of course, the challenge with work. She may be feeling some pressure. This is a card for me that talks about pressure, right? And it could be like pressure to perform, right? It could be like she's stuck in the middle of 2 things. She's stuck in the middle between the needs of the company and her own needs, right? So there's a lot to say with the 2 of spades, but it indicates, just generally speaking, being a spade, that there is a block, a challenge, or an obstacle, right? Okay, so now the next card may give us more information about the 2 of spades. And here we have the, oh my goodness, the 10 of clubs. Okay, so now the 10 of clubs represents business. It's a work and business card. So here we have problems, conflict with a working environment. For me, this represents retail. So now I did not say what type of environment that Beth was working in. So one of the meanings of the 10 of clubs for me in terms of work or business is retail. So we could just put that, as a something we may want to ask Beth if we were reading for Beth. If Beth was an actual person and she was here and she did not tell us what the industry was, I might ask her if it was retail, right? So that is one thing. Now, the 10, if the clubs represent work or business, the 10 would represent a lot of that, right? So there's a lot of work, right? So the conflict or the challenge or the problem is that there's a lot of work to do, right? So that really just fits with that, right? And she may be feeling overwhelmed as a result of that. A lot of pressure to do a lot of work, right? Now, the other thing about the pips, the suit pips, when I get a spade and a club, it represents working out a problem, right? A problem that is being worked out. So right now, even though Beth articulated, or I articulated it for Beth, that there is a problem, the cards here would suggest on some level it could be worked out. However, it would take a lot of work or effort to work out the problem because we have a 10, right? A high number would represent a lot of work or effort here to work it out, right? And if this is a retail business, it may be something that Beth might want to consider bringing in other people within the company to help her. Because now remember, the 2 of spades would suggest help or support that she's not getting because it's attached to a spade, right? So it might be well worth her effort to see if she can get some other people in the company involved to kind of maybe lighten her load, right? So there is that. Okay, so now that to me perfectly fits the situation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to the contributing factors and take a look at that before I look at the answer. Now, you could just go right from the situation to the answer, right? And then do the contributing factors, but I'm going to do the contributing factors first. So the card at the top, and here we have the 9 of spades. Okay, so the 9 of spades for me always represents loss or disappointment, right? So this would just be a matter of the contributing factor here is that she's losing people, right? That was one of the things that was said in the kind of talking out of the situation, the specifics of the scenario, right? She's losing people, right? She's not being able to keep new people on, and she's not able to retain people, the long-term people, right? So that is clearly an issue. So it represents loss and disappointment, right? So that would be the chief meaning of the 9 of spades. Now notice that we have another spades card. So now we have a block or a challenge. And then this last card may give us more of an idea about that. Now before I turn this card over, this is also known as a pivot card. So when you're doing your reading, this is the answer. And then you also want to consider what the pivot card is, because the pivot could be like a secondary type answer, right? So you want to pay attention to the answer, but you also want to look here. So the pivot card here is the, okay, so here we have the 6 of hearts. So now the 6 of hearts for me can represent male energy, right? So there could be a man on the job that is a source of disappointment for Beth. Because again, the Six of Hearts for me represents male energy or masculine energy, and usually points to, it could be a friend, a relative, but in this case, since it's a working relationship, then it would be maybe another man on the job. Or a man on the job, I should, instead of another man, a particular man on the job, right? So that's what I would see with that. So it really doesn't say anything more about that. One of the other meanings of the Six of Hearts for me can represent enlightenment. So it could just be a matter of there's loss or disappointment in the fact that the situation has not cleared itself up, and that may suggest that it's been going on for some time, right? But the fact that the Nine of Spades is here represents loss or disappointment. But I would say loss or disappointment with regard to a man who figures into the situation. Okay, so now what we can do is take a look at the answer. So now remember, let's come back to the question. So the question really was about whether Beth should stay with the company that she's at, or should she consider leaving and finding work elsewhere. Okay, so here's the answer. Top card. Here we have the Ten of Diamonds. So the Ten of Diamonds is a card that talks about career, right? Whereas the Ten of Clubs is the work or business card. This is the career card. Now, it would say that if she were to choose to stay, it's because she's got a lot invested where she's at. The Ten of Diamonds is a card of investment. So it could be a lot of it, investment of time. She's been there a long period of time. An investment of energy, an investment of resources, or that she really is getting paid, because this card represents money, right? And money in like a sense of abundance, right? Like she's not hurting for money, right? Even though the job may be demanding in the moment, she's getting paid and getting paid well. So that would be one consideration if she were to choose to stay. It may be that she's got a lot invested in staying with the company, and most likely because of, I would say, monetary compensation, right? But now if she were to choose to leave, then this card could suggest on some level, taking a look at what her worth and value is, or keeping in mind what she needs to be bringing in or earning as far as income goes, right? Okay, so that's how I would look at the Ten of Diamonds. Now, I will say this, and I didn't touch on this before. We have a repeating number here. We have two tens. So 10 is a number of transition, right? So here we have to keep in mind a transition can sometimes mean an exit, right? Or, like transition, like I'm moving away from something, I'm moving into something else. Or it could just represent that this is a transitional period in terms of the employee situation. Everything that she's experiencing is a transitional period, meaning like she will at some point get through it, right? The 10 in that regard is the number of success. And we want to keep that in mind, because this card can represent success, especially with the fact that it's a diamond and a red card. Red cards in playing card cartomancy are more positive than the black cards, right? So we have that. Now, final card, Seven of Clubs. Okay, so the Seven of Clubs represents putting your nose to the grindstone and hard work. So now I will say, just looking at the cards, none of these cards for me are like exit cards or new work cards. So just looking at the spread overall, keeping that in mind, I would say the cards are suggesting to Beth that it may be more in her interest to stay despite the difficulties, right? It could suggest that she will work her way through it. Remember, working out of a problem. It will take a lot of work or effort, but it is doable, right? It may be a matter of working through whatever the loss or disappointment, considering whoever this man is that's attached to the situation, right? And and it could just be a matter of responsibility or communication too, because the 6 represents responsibility or communication, right? So it could just be a matter of there's disappointment with regard to a man regarding either responsibility or communication, right? Now, back to the Seven of Clubs. So like I was saying, the Seven of Clubs represents hard work, but it also represents small difficulties, right? And it represents a situation that improves. With the seven in playing card cartomancy, for me anyway, represents improvement. So it represents spirituality, of course, but this is not a spiritual question. So I would also apply the meaning of improvement, right? So again, the situation could improve itself, but it will take some work and effort just because it's attached to a club. It's a matter of hard work, and the other meaning here is putting your nose to the grindstone, right? So she may go through a little bit of time where she's going to have to continually work hard to turn things around, but it is doable, right? So that is how I would answer the question about Beth considering leaving her existing workplace and looking for other work. I would just say overall, it's in her best interest to stick it out, and none of these cards imply leaving the position that she's in, right? So that's how I would answer that. So now, with that done, let's go ahead and move on to another scenario. All right, and we're back to do our second demo using the answer spread. So I have the cards on the table, and I've been giving some thought as to what I would like to explore in this example. So let's just say that we have another woman, and so let's call her Joanna. So Joanna is a professional card reader, and she has an idea for an oracle deck, and so she's really excited about working on the oracle deck, and she's exploring the possibility of presenting the oracle deck to the public, meaning like putting it out for the market to buy, like people who are interested in it can purchase it. So she wants to know about the project overall. Will the project go forward successfully? Meaning like, will the deck see the light of day, and would it be something that would be of interest to people? Meaning like, will she be able to sell it to the public? Okay, so that's the question. Like, will Joanna's idea for an oracle card deck sell in the public marketplace? Okay, so let's shuffle that into the cards. So I'm focusing on the question. All right, I'm feeling one more time will be good, so I'm going to go ahead and honor that. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck again. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and fan out the cards. And I'm looking for 6 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. And I want to say at this point, however you choose your cards, that would work for you. I'm just showing you how I work through my process and going about selecting cards, but I'm not saying that this is the way you need to do it. I'm picking the remainder of the deck up. Counting back, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Now remember, 3 cards at the top in a row, and then 3 cards beneath those cards in the second row. Okay. Just taking a moment to get that better in view. Okay. I think that will work. All right. So now remember, they're read vertically. Situation, answer, contributing factors. Okay, so this time I'm just going to read them straight across because I want to keep in mind the pivot card. We're going to look at the answer and then we'll look at the pivot card in relationship to the answer. Okay, so now remember we have Joanna, who is a professional card reader. She wants to know about her idea for an oracle card deck, and she wants to know about putting it out into the marketplace. In other words, would it be something that would interest people to purchase, right? Okay. First card, situation. Here we have the same card from the last scenario. Here we have the two of spades. So here again, there is some sort of conflict, and I would say for Joanna in this particular case, the conflict may be internal, right? She may be interconflicted about this, about whether or not she wants to offer to the public. The two in this case would be a number of sharing, right? So she may still be not quite 100% committed to the idea of sharing it with the public, right? So there may be that with the two of spades. But anyway, here we have a block or a challenge or a problem going in, right? So in the situation, with regard to the situation, we're going into seeing some type of challenge, obstacle, or block, right? And again, with the two, in this particular case, it's about sharing. I would put it with sharing. Not sure whether or not the deck is something that needs to be shared with other people. Okay. And here we have the Jack of Spades. Okay, so now here we have the idea here would be a spade and a spade. So here we have an increased challenge, increased problem, that kind of thing. What would the Jack of Spades suggest? Well, for me, all the jacks are messengers, right? So here we have a problematic message, a challenging message, a difficult message. So it may be she needs to consider what is the theme or the overall message of the deck. What does it have to offer people if they were to use it for their own reading purposes, right? What does it have to say? Is she even clear on what the overall message of the deck is, right? Now, sometimes the Jack of Spades can represent a rival. So it might be in her best interest to be really clear on whether or not there's another deck like the one she wants to put out there if it's not already in existence. And would she be copying that? Because for me, the Jack of Spades can represent a rival, right? And that's a rival like rival, like someone who is also like a competitor, something of that nature, right? So it would be like, what would the deck offer that's different or unique and special when it comes to messages? That's what would be the first thing that I would say with these cards. But clearly there's an issue here. And I'm just thinking like with the jacks being messengers, it makes me feel like it may be more of a communication type thing. Now I will say this is just a visual. It's interesting to note that the jack is facing the answer column, right? And not only that, but has a spyglass, right? So a spyglass helps us take a closer look at something. So the message here could be Joanna really needs to pay attention to what the answer here is regarding her question, right? With the Jack of Spades looking at it now. It's also too like maybe this card in particular out of the two cards, right? So that's just a visual cue. And because I read with direction in mind when it comes to the face cards. The face card is facing this way, so it's giving some attention to this card. Okay. So now let's go right into the answer. Top card is the Two of Hearts. So now the Two of Hearts represents expectations. Because for me, this card can represent pregnancy, right? So this is a nice card to have with regard to pregnancy, right? Pregnancy means that we are in the stage before giving birth. Now, if we take that metaphorically, this could be the creative process Joanna needs to undergo to bring the deck into manifestation, meaning birth the deck, right? But again, there's a thing here about sharing, right? We have the two, again, repeating. So the two is an outstanding number, a repetitive number. So there's issues around sharing, something that's going to be mutually beneficial, that kind of thing. So it could just be a matter of like, what are the expectations that she may have? What are the expectations she has for the public? What are her expectations about how the deck would perform out in the world if she were to present it, to offer it to the public, those kinds of things. But for me, the chief meaning here is about expectations, right? Okay, and giving birth to something. So now, paying attention to this card. Here we go. Okay, so now here we have the Queen of Clubs. So now the Queen of Clubs could be Joanna, right? When I'm reading for a person using playing cards and a card that matches their gender turns up, it may be a nod to the person. So now, here's the thing. The Queen of Clubs can represent a professional or business woman, right? And I led with the idea that Joanna is a professional card reader, right? So it could be that maybe it's worth her effort to kind of share maybe the messages, or that the deck is like a sum total of messages that she has received through her work as a reader, right? So I would definitely make this Joanna, right? And it would be like, if I go with the idea that this Jack is looking at Joanna, like the message here would be, how is the deck like you? Meaning like Joanna, right? How can Joanna bring more of herself into the project and maybe not make it like other people in her industry, right? Because remember now, this is the rival, right? So like, not copying somebody else, but make the deck unique to her and her work and the way she approaches card reading, right? So that is one way of looking at that. The other thing here, it puts the answer in her hands, right? So it's saying it's really up to her, right? If these two are the answer cards, then it's really up to her. And I would say, if this is her, about what are her expectations, right? But if this card is pregnancy and then this is Joanna, that would be, of course, like, that would be a nod to, yes, giving birth to the deck, right? And the only other thing I would say, clubs is about the public and about being social, right? So this is a woman who is helpful, like she's a friend or she's a helpful person in regards to the public or something having to do with some type of social sphere, right? So again, it could just be her expectations for the deck is that she believes that it's going to be something that's going to be a helpful tool or resource for other people, right? And maybe in helping them with some sort of block, right? If this is the situation, right? So so the Jack is looking at the Queen, but the Queen is also looking at the Jack, right? So it could just be a matter of, what is her message? What clarity is she hoping that people will get from working with her deck, right? But to me, this is not a no. This is like a clear yes, especially with her card being there, to work on the deck, right? To offer it to the public. Okay, so now let's take a look at the contributing factors. Ace of Clubs. I'm going to turn it this way because I like the club to be upright. So Ace of Clubs, right? So now this is new work, right? And also, just being committed to that process. Great card to have for what Joanna wants to do in terms of the project, right? So working on it. So, but it's in its initial stages, right? The Ace of Clubs, all aces for me represent the beginning or starting point to something. So this just represents the beginning of work or the beginning having to do with business, right? But moving forward with that, right? Okay. So now, pivot card. Jack of Clubs. And what I love about this is, okay, if we just take this as a row, here we have the Jack of Clubs. So now the Jack of Clubs is just like the Jack of Spades because it represents news or messages. But here's the thing. It's got a club attached to it. It represents news or messages for the public. So this is social messages, public messages, news for the public, messages for the public, right? And that is what she's hoping to provide with this deck, right? She wants to sell it. So here we have the idea of like, how would she communicate that to the public? Going through the process, right? It's in its initial stages, but what is she going to say about the process as it goes along? But clearly, whatever it is that she wants to do with this Oracle deck, it does have something to say. It does have something to offer. She just has to be willing to work at it because she has a club and a club, right? So that means, working on something. Increased work, right? It just represents more. So that she has to also maybe kind of keep in mind how much work may be involved in the process. And that now this could be Joanna, but it could also be her getting another person involved, maybe somebody who's creative. This may be a collaboration with somebody who is artistic, right? So this would be a relationship, Two of Hearts, with the Queen of Clubs. If this isn't Joanna, then this could be a woman who's going to be helpful to Joanna. So if Joanna's not going to do everything herself, meaning she doesn't have the concept and she's going to do the artwork, she could do that all herself, the concept and the artwork and all of that, or she's going to just be the conceptualist and have somebody else come into doing the art, right? So, but clearly these cards are saying that, she really should consider moving forward with the project. I would say to Joanna, if she was an actual person and sitting in front of me, I would say for her to keep in mind what are the distinct messages of the deck, how is the deck reflective of her and her experiences, giving readings, right? If she's been a professional reader for X amount of years, meaning she's got some street cred, or she's got some wealth of experience based on the number of years she's been reading. How does all of that play into the deck itself, right? And what she feels the deck has to say, right? And it could just be a matter of she becomes more clear on the messaging as time goes on, because we move from a spade here to a club. Now remember, in our previous example, a spade represents a problem, but coming with clubs after it, or having clubs come after it, it represents the problem getting worked out. So it may just be a matter she becomes more clear on the messaging or the messages of the cards within the deck. It may even be that she uses her name in the deck. It reminds me of my very first Oracle deck that I created. I called the Oracle of Himm. And that was a very personal deck, right? So, and that was, reminding me of the Two of Spades, because I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted to share it with the public, but I actually did share it in some videos, but I did not offer it for sale. So it, the Two of Spades made me think of that. But anyway, as a whole, that is the answer spread for Joanna's question. So now we're going to pick up the cards and close out this video with one more scenario. All right, and we're back with our third and final scenario for this video, demonstrating the answer spread. And while I was picking up the cards from the previous scenario, this one came to mind. So let's say we're going to shift gears and we're going to move from work and business type situations and creative endeavors to something a little more personal and close to home. So let's say we have a man, and his name, let's call him Jeff. So Jeff is getting on in years, and he's becoming really reflective on his family. And so let's give him a son. So let's say he has a son, and his son's name is Larry. So Jeff and Larry have had a falling out, and they have not spoken for, let's say, at least 10 years. Okay, so Jeff and Larry have not spoken in 10 years, and because Jeff is getting older, he's feeling like he wants to do his part in kind of reconciling or, trying to repair that relationship with his son. And so he's asking if that relationship can be repaired. So that's the question. Jeff wants to know if his relationship with Larry can be repaired. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a moment to shuffle the cards. And I'm going to shuffle that question into the deck as I'm shuffling. So remember, Jeff is asking about the relationship with his son Larry. He wants to know if that relationship will be repaired. And so as I'm thinking about that question, that is actually a yes or no question. So maybe we could ask the cards, what does Jeff need to know about his part in possibly repairing that relationship? I think that's a more empowering question, so I'm just going to take a little liberties on tweaking that. Okay, feeling one more time. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Again, away from me, because this does not involve me. I'm going to fan the cards out. And so I'm looking for the fan for 6 cards. And I'm just picking out the ones that are getting my attention. Right, so I picked the 6 cards. Okay, I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up and put that to one side. I'm going to count back. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Now we're going to lay out the cards. Remember, they get laid out in 2 rows of 3. We have 3 cards on the top, 3 underneath. All right. So now remember, situation, answer, contributing factors, okay? So now, for Jeff, situation. Here we have the Queen of Spades. Okay, so the Queen of Spades could be a person who may be figuring into this. So you have to take into account what the scenario is and who the players in the scenario are. So now we have 2 men who are involved. So the Queen of Spades, regardless of gender, could represent either Jeff or Larry. Now, if we go with the idea, I tend to read specifically with gender in mind. So for me, queens always represent women. So if there's not a woman who fits into the situation in some way, then it could be the more metaphorical aspects of the queen that the card is trying to talk about. So here we have a spade card again. Notice that in all 3 scenarios, a spade card was the first card in the reading, right? So here we have a problem, a block, or a challenge. It's addressing that, right? So the queens, for me, as a theme, can represent caring and nurturing because those are all feminine type aspects or qualities, right? So here we have maybe a problem with caring, a problem with nurturing, right? This is a relationship that has gone on for some time that is not being cared for, is not being nurtured, right? So that's the first thing. Now, the Queen of Spades can represent somebody who's divorced or separated, right? So it's acknowledging a separation, right? Jeff and Larry have had a falling out, and according to Jeff, they have not spoken in 10 years at least, right? So here we have a separation, and in some regards, it can be like a divorce, right? So it is touching on those aspects, right? So I would look at the queen in this particular case more as a metaphor and not as an actual person. Now, if a woman was figuring into this situation, then I might suggest that was the woman. But that is how I'm choosing to read the Queen of Spades. I'm focusing more on the idea that is talking about being separated or being quote-unquote divorced, right? Okay, so now let's look at the card underneath it. Here we have the 7 of clubs. So now remember, Larry asked a question about the relationship being repaired, right? So here we have the 7 of clubs. If you remember, the last time it showed up, it represents improvement, right? So here we have a problem with the situation that is not improving, right? Wanting to improve something, right? But it's not, it's got a block or a challenge or an obstacle, right? It could just be the matter of the fact that it's been so long. That could be the issue or the challenge. But the fact here is that this talks about improvement, but it would take work or effort, right? This is, remember, this is about hard work and putting your nose to the grindstone. Here's the rub. Okay, so now this may be another aspect of it where the queen comes in, right? The queen can also represent being single, right? If you are divorced or separated, chances are you are becoming, if you're not already, becoming single, right? So here we have maybe the idea here about one person wanting to put in the work. It's not going to work unless both people, meaning both Jeff and Larry, want to do the work to improve the relationship, right? So that's how I would read these 2 cards. Okay, so now let's look at the answer. What's the answer here for Jeff? Here we have the King of Spades. So now we have the King. I would make this Jeff because Jeff is asking the question, right? Older man, right? So here we have now, we have the King and the Queen of Spades. So now I would ask Larry at this point, what's the deal with his wife, if he's married. Like, what does his wife have to say about it? Because here we have the queen and the king of the same suit. Usually represents a man and a woman who are spouses or partners or something of that nature, because they have the same suit attached to them, right? So it would be a matter of, is his wife, let's say hypothetically that Jeff is married, right? So let's say, is his wife the driving force or the motivator, because she's looking at the king? He's not looking at her, but she's looking at him, right? Is she the driving force for him wanting to work on repairing his relationship with his son Larry, right? Because we don't know if she is prominent in the situation, what role she has in her relationship with. Does she also not have a relationship with her son, or does she have one and is kind of like nudging, like behind the scenes, nudging Jeff to work on repairing his relationship, right, with Larry? Now, it could also be because she's behind him, that she's offering support, right? But again, we wouldn't know that unless we had Jeff here to actually ask him, what's the deal with that? But the fact that I'm going to make this Jeff would suggest on some level, his card being in the answer column would suggest on some level, it's up to him. To some degree, the outcome is up to him. Not entirely, but he has a role or a part to play, right? Simply because his card is there, right? Now, one of the things he might need to do is, the spade would suggest maybe not to be so negative or pessimistic in terms of his outlook, or maybe in terms of being negative or pessimistic when it came to his relationship with Larry. Like, we don't know what it was that kind of broke them up, so to speak, right? But that's what I would offer about the king, right? The king represents power, control, and mastery. So this would be, getting a grip on your mind, right? Your thoughts, right? So it could be like, what is his mindset regarding Larry? What is his mindset about his relationship to Larry, right? What is his mindset about repairing whatever the damage is that's been done in that relationship, right? Okay, so next card under the answer column. Okay, so here we have the Eight of Diamonds. So the Eight of Diamonds, I would put this here. Now, if one of the meanings of the Eight of Diamonds for me has to do with money, right? So if it's not a money issue, then it could just be about value, right? And it could just be a matter of how valuable is his relationship to Larry at this time, right? It may be a matter of he might need to demonstrate more than just words, that he really is serious about wanting to repair the damage. But here's the thing. So when I talk about the Eight of Diamonds being a money card, I also tend to think of it about like financial accounts, record keeping, financial records, accounting, right? So if we take that out of the context of the money, right, and just making it about record keeping and accounting, it may be that Jeff, the father, has to be mindful of not keeping score or keeping records of whatever the situation has been with him and his son Larry, right? This idea of like people who keep score, or people who, tend to remember everything and don't forget things, that kind of thing, like, and then they kind of throw it up in your face. I'm kind of getting that energy with the King of Spades and the Eight of Diamonds. Like, that may be Jeff's MO, and if that's the case, then the cards are asking him, would he be willing to change it, right? That kind of thing. It could also be, too, for me, the Eight of Diamonds is a card that talks about seeing things, right? So this card is about gaining some kind of insight, right? So it could just be a matter of maybe seeking some kind of professional help. Now, in this regard, the King of Spades can be a doctor. So this could be, maybe a psychologist, doctor of the mind, right? Psychologist, psychiatrist, somebody that he is paying, Eight of Diamonds, to help him gain some clear insight, right? To help him see the situation a different way with his son, right? Again, because the Eight of Diamonds can represent the eyes and glasses can be a pun for a spectacle, right? So if Jeff wants to repair his relationship with Larry, he has to be willing to do something that can be seen, right? Not just give lip service. So it may be taking some kind of action so that Larry, his son, can see that he wants to repair the relationship, right? So that's how I would look at that. The Eight of Diamonds is a card that would represent gaining insight, seeing a situation clearly, right? Or differently, again, with the idea of glasses and spectacles, right? Okay, so now let's look at the contributing factors, right? Starting with the card at the top. And here we have the Ace of Diamonds. Okay, so, and I love the fact that the King is looking at the Ace of Diamonds. So the Ace of Diamonds is known as a ring card, right? It's known as an engagement ring. So I tend to look at this as, you know, Jeff needs to consider being engaging, right? And he needs to be committed. If I take the symbol of an engagement ring and break it down, then being engaging, meaning like he has to be the one maybe to kind of seek out Larry, because Larry may not seek him out. But he has to be engaging and he has to be committed. Right? So those are the two things I would see. Like, how committed is he in repairing this damage? You know? Would he be willing to be the one who maybe initially has to engage Larry? Okay. Then the pivot card, the Eight of... Okay. So here we have the Eight of Hearts. Now notice that we have the number 8 repeating twice. So the 8 is a number for me when I use playing cards. The numerology of it represents power. So there may be a power issue, a power struggle here that we need to keep in mind, right? And of course, if Jeff is the father, then there may be issues around him, you know, really working within that title, you know, operating from that title of being father, like, you know, that kind of thing, right? And maybe Larry was, you know, just tired of that, you know, not wanting to continue to engage with somebody who was hung up on, you know, power and wanting to be in control, right? And it could also be like maybe Larry just kind of quit the relationship because he wanted to be in control of his own life. We don't know. I'm just throwing those out there as possibilities because of the number 8 repeating twice. It usually represents power and control, right? But I would see this as a definite sign that there is a power issue or struggle. Okay, so now other meanings for the Eight of Hearts. The Eight of Hearts for me represents trust, mutual trust, right? So here we would have the issue about how can Jeff show or demonstrate trust in Larry? How can he get Larry to trust him? I would say here, looking at that, there's an issue regarding trust that has been problematic in the relationship, right? So it's about mutual trust, right? It's not a one-way street. Both parties have to be willing to trust the other person. It could be not necessarily just trusting the person at their words, but also trusting that they're going to do the work to repair the relationship, right? At this point, it's about going beyond lip service, right? But it's also about being optimistic. The Eight of Hearts is about optimism. It's about mutual trust. And it could also be, you know, the 8 being about power. It's about the power of love. You know, if we go with the idea, metaphorically speaking, that love is a powerful force, then if they just go in with the idea that they're going to do it for love's sake, and that it could be very powerful, that could go a long way. But I would just say, for me, the Eight of Hearts, in this context, I'm seeing this more as, you know, mutual trust, optimism, and faith. So on that note, I will go ahead and end this reading here and also end the video. Thank you so much for sharing the space here with me as I went through some more examples using the answer spread. Again, this was one of the more popular videos within my series. There's been a number of them, but recently a lot of people have been reaching out and asking me to provide some more examples using the answer spread because they just enjoyed it so much. So I'm thankful for those who watched the first video. I'm thankful for those of you who asked and requested to see some more examples. And so I hope with you in mind that you found these 3 examples somewhat helpful, somewhat informative, somewhat enlightening in your own work with the answer spread. So this has been Jameson Mitchell. I'm signing off. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing the space here with you again in our next video together. So until then, I'm hoping that you're having a wonderful day, and take care.